North Dakota allowed militarized police to come in and try to defuse what they called a riot, when people just stand up to talk. Everybody that came out of Standing Rock is out there fighting somewhere for Mother Earth, for the environment. A unification of a desire to prove to the world that we can do this. I'm the landowner here along with my wife, and we're on the White Earth Reservation, which means that we have a treaty with the United States government to live here. My role in the community is that I'm a cultural person, I'm a spiritual person in the community of the Ojibwe here in Minnesota. Last year, after Standing Rock, I opened Camp Turtle Island, and it was really hopefully a sanctuary, a haven for people coming out of Standing Rock that needed a place to heal. We were here all winter in 20 below zero weather. The ones that are here now today survived. They've learned the skills that they needed to chop wood, make a fire in less than 10 minutes, cut up meat, cook, and take care of each other, the most important thing. Mikanakmanes literally translates to Turtle Island. This shows North America, how the turtle sits naturally over all of North America, so we call all of North America Turtle Island. What we do here is we just share part of our life with those who want to come by and are interested. We're trying to create self-sustainable systems, gardening, solar systems, wind technology, cooperating with other people to trade, barter, and not have to depend on big oil or corporations or Walmart.
I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. The names that I've earned are Gypsyfoot. Tulsa, Oklahoma, the city I hail from, was the oil capital of the world until the late 70s, early 80s, and that's when OPEC came in and the Middle East got very heavily involved into oil. We have 4 different refineries that are off the Arkansas River, and with the refineries we also have a lot of oil storage containers that, may I say, blow on a pretty regular. We now have earthquakes from fracking. There's no major fault lines that run through the area that I live in. All the earthquakes are from the fracking. The last earthquake that happened was such a strong magnitude earthquake that it was felt in 5 different states. That has kind of put me on a deal of fighting pipelines. I'm of Cherokee and Choctaw and Chickasaw lineage, and I've been paying attention to what was going on the reservation at Standing Rock, North Dakota. And there's a lot of political activities that I've gotten involved in because my mind drew me that way. Standing Rock was the first political activity that I got involved in because my heart drew me that way. The day-to-day living at the camps was actually quite beautiful. The police brutality was so bad that the UN came out to document it. In North Dakota, they have like 25 below zero and colder during the winter. There was this one particular night, there was this Morton County Sheriff's Department dude. He was smiling when he was shooting people with this water cannon, and I see people in frozen clothes, grandmas that have been hit with water cannon, people that have been shot, with the rubber bullets during watching concussion grenades go off around. I start helping, getting people out of the cold clothes, getting them wrapped up in blankets, get them rewarmed, get them in dry clothes, hit them with milk and magnesia if they'd been pepper sprayed or experienced any of the tear gas. People that had been hit with rubber bullets, try to see where they'd been hit at. And then I hear this woman screaming. She got hit with a concussion grenade out there, and her arm was hanging. There was over 200 people taken to the hospital with hypothermia, frostbite, being hit with the rubber bullets, but there wasn't one person arrested that night. They set an eviction date up, and by then the camp has shrank. We didn't have 10, 15,000 people in camp. We had 500 or 600 people or less. Then it shrank down to 200 that was trying to do a cleanup.
They came up the hills with their vehicles, and they had helicopters with like a gun on the side. We're just trying to get everything and everyone out as safe as we can. When they were trying to get us, they would handcuff us, put us down to the ground. There was a guy that was screaming because they were forcing him on the ground and they broke his hip and they didn't care. Stripped some of us down just to our underwear, and they put us in dog cages when they did. They left the whole back freezing cold.
For all the indigenous people that are in the United States and stuff, we have prophecies that talk about, where we're from and how things are going to happen. We have prophecies still, and the one that was spoke out in Lakota, out in the Dakotas, was that there'll come a time that the black snake will come across the land and poison the water. We talk about when the Seven Fire Council will come back together. That's the first time in 300 years that they've sat around a table and talked, that they made agreements together. That's fulfilling a prophecy. When I was at Standing Rock and when I came back to Minnesota, Enbridge had renewed the fight in Minnesota to put another pipeline replacement line in, line 3. They want to take out a 36-inch pipeline and put in a 38-inch pipeline, increasing the capacity so that they can push tar sand oils from Alberta, Canada to Lake Superior and put it on barges and ship it out of country to refining areas in China, wherever. Ultimately, they are shipping the tar sand oils out of the country as quick as possible so that they can realize a profit before that industry collapses. The Line 3 pipeline is an aging line. It's 56 years old. It has a protective covering on it that is breaking down. We know there are 900 anomalies in this pipeline that exist. It needs to be replaced. But what they're saying is that it is so cost prohibitive for them to go in and take Line 3 out of the ground and put a new line in, that they want to deviate 147 miles through brand new cultural areas that are historically significant to the Ojibwe and through our wild rice beds. The wild rice is part of the Ojibwe culture. They talk about migrating, expanding to where we found the good berry of Monoman that grew on the water. And that if we took care of that wild rice, if we took care of Monoman, that it would take care of us. Enbridge has not had a good track record. They have never had a pipeline yet that hasn't had a spill. We just had 210,000 gallons spilled in South Dakota that was in a new line. We are in a pristine area where we have a watershed heading south and a watershed heading north. There's a great risk of global poisoning of our water system. We have 32,000 union workers in Minnesota waiting to go to work. Enbridge wants to take their people that are loyal to them. They're bringing them out of Louisiana, out of Texas, and they're bringing them all the way up here north to do the construction. Enbridge says that they're going to employ 2,000 union members. In reality, they're going to employ them for a very, very short time. And they said maybe 20 long-term jobs in the state of Minnesota. The murdered and missing Indigenous women that are disappearing along the pipeline, the necessity to feed the hunger of these workers who are just put there to work for a corporation and through their boredom go to drugs, go to abuse. A subculture supplying the pipeline with entertainment.
We have these women that are coming up missing and nobody's looking for them except their families. A friend of mine's granddaughter came up missing. This gentleman tried to file 2 different police reports to get his granddaughter looked for, and neither of the agencies would accept it because they didn't know where she came up missing from, whether it was the reservation or if it was off state side.
We're tired of seeing our women disappear. We're tired of seeing corporations and police turn a blind eye.
What Standing Rock did for me is it awoke me to the things that I need to learn.
Standing Rock brought everybody to the point that they recognize there are things being done to the Indigenous population, the Indigenous culture. We have rights that haven't been recognized for over 300 years.
We had genocide going on from the time colonization happened here in the United States, but it really kicked into full swing when Andrew Jackson came into the White House and he started moving Native Americans off the East Coast. They wanted those properties for plantations. My tribe, they put them on what was called the Trail of Tears. They were basically made to walk 1,500 miles to 2,000 miles to Oklahoma Oklahoma right before winter. A lot of people froze to death. They didn't send enough food, and what food they sent, the Army stole. And so there was a lot of people that starved to death on this walk. They considered Oklahoma a barren land, but then they realized, oh, the Native Americans, they're growing food. So then they take that land away from Native Americans, and white people started farming it. Early 1900s, they discovered that Oklahoma's got oil. So more land grab. Here in the United States, they have what's called reservations. They're federal reserved land for Native Americans, and that's where they moved the Native Americans to. They would put enemy reservations next to enemy reservations. So like the Sioux and the Cheyenne, back in the day, they wasn't necessarily really friendly with each other. So they would put their reservations right next to each other like this and make them be neighbors on the hopes that maybe they could save some bullets and the Indians would kill themselves off. They sent out these blankets that had smallpox in them. They would give them to the tribes, acting like it was a gift to keep people warm. Totally decimated tribes, and also totally wiped out some tribes off the map altogether, like they're no longer here. If they didn't kill you, they was going to take your kids and put them in boarding schools, and that's where the assimilation began and the colonization began. They would take children from 3 years old, smaller, out of their families, take them hundreds of miles away from their home. They would beat them for speaking their language. They made them wear Western clothes. They would cut their hair, and hair is very important. It's very much a part of the culture. There was a lot of sexual and physical abuse that went on in the boarding schools.
We're at the Catholic cemetery that was actually land donated to the Catholic Church. These are all what they call allotted lands. When the reservation was formed, we owned everything in common, and we didn't have land. And so in 1887, they started allotting lands out because by that time, a lot of the timber was being cut while they were building America, and we were still sitting on a lot of the best timber. And so they had to find a way to get at our lands. A full-blood, what they call, an Indian, he couldn't sell land. So they said a mixed blood, person half and half, could sell land within 25 years. What they did is they'd come up and they'd scratch and pinch you. And they could tell, or look at your hair, and they could tell how much Indian you were by how fast the blood came back after they pinched you. And so they'd pinch you or scratch you, and then they would say, well, he's got to be a mixed blood. So they'd write you down as mixed blood. Next thing you know, your lands are up for, even though you were full-bloods and couldn't sell it. We're the only people that have a blood quantum today. It still happens, so it's just part of what we live with. A lot of my people are chiefs, they were treaty signers. One they call Hole in a Day, Bugnegishik. He didn't want a lot of the non-Indians coming because at the time, a lot of them were selling whiskey, a lot of things that they didn't, he didn't want here, knowing there was going to be problems when that happened. And so he was assassinated.
Now on the reservations, we have very high alcoholism, because alcohol, that's a European thing. As Native Americans, it makes us very, very sick. We have a very high suicide rate, a very high drug addiction rate. You have a lot of extreme poverty.
Here at Camp Turtle Island, we are in a battle to educate our youth. So the camp is also cultural. So many of the people that are my age never understood what it was meant to be Indigenous. Our religion, our spirituality was illegal up until 1978 in the United States.
You could go to prison for doing ghost dance if you were Sioux. You could go to prison if you were Cherokee for doing the green corn dance.
If there were ceremonies, they were underground. They were practiced behind closed doors.
There's a thing that's called blood memory. My blood remembers what my mind does not know. And by learning the traditions, learning to speak the languages, this, that, and the other, that means our culture never dies.
This is the beginning of maple syrup season. We've picked on this tree to carry the message to everybody else. So we offer tobacco here to the tree in a good way that Dapana Seema, accept this tobacco. That we're out here in a good way, that we're here to participate with nature and to take care of it. We've always done that culturally. We've always been told to do that. And now modern science is finding out that the root systems are connected underground, that their energy travels through and they do communicate. Our culture is that we're here to gather maple syrup, that we're breaking the winter fast. We survive the winter. We put out our feast dishes and stuff to acknowledge, that this is what we give to them, and ask in return that they help us. In the beginning, there was a time that the Native Americans would lay underneath the trees and the maple syrup would just drip down into their mouth. And they got greedy, they got lazy, and they weren't putting their tobacco out. The spirit world, Winnebago and Nanabaju, they got upset seeing this, and they called in Gimme One, the rain. And it rained and watered it down. So now we have to go out and work for it. And it's a lot of work. 40 gallons to 1 gallon of syrup. Right now we're just watching it drip just real slow. And then as the sun comes out and it warms up the tree, the capillaries, the veins, wake up and start pumping it. Once we take the tap out and let the air get to it, it'll seal off and quit dripping. And then it'll heal themselves. Our main evaporator now, this is a commercial size. Wood fired, there's grates underneath it for the ashes, instead of using propane or something that's off the oil fields. The syrup goes into here first and it warms it from the fire. And then it comes all the way up here to the front. We call this the boiling pan. And this is where most of the evaporation happens. So we boil it off here, and I've got drain holes in here. It'll come back into here, and you can see it's kind of down just a little bit lower. It'll come into here, and through the weight of it, this will be the final syrup pan. And then we have a drain on the other side that we can drain it off for our final syrup. A few years back, we started looking at what the effects of diabetes is on Anishinaabe, on Native American, on our elders. And we found that by returning our people to a natural diet with the venison, the wild rice, the maple syrup, that by using maple syrup for sweetener and not the processed white sugar from sugar beets or cane, that we're actually getting people that don't have to have the insulin shot anymore. Everything that we need is here. All our medicines, all our shelter, everything. The tree that we use for the wigwam is the ironwood. So we harvest the ironwood, and it's extremely flexible. Even this one, not hurting it. They're just extremely slow growing, and they take the minerals out of the ground. And if we were to cut them with a saw at night, you could see sparks because they're hitting the iron that's in the bark. Human beings require everything out here to survive, but everything out here doesn't require human beings.
If people across the world do not stay, stand, resist, fight what's going on in every nation across the world when it comes to the environment, it doesn't matter what political activity you belong to. If we all don't band together on this particular issue, we will not have anything to fight for. Nothing.
Every time that we protest on the streets, we're costing them time and energy. We're prepared to take it all the way if we have to protect. We're here for the children.